Here, coming at you with a last Epoch video, and this time it's going to be a build guide for the Avalanche Shaman, the channeling one. It's going to be an updated guide. I already have one on the channel, but this is kind of like the final form. It is currently rank 1 Shaman on the softcore ladder, as you'll see. Go to ladder, come down to 367, Totem Gang, Shaman, no other Shaman, as you can see. Totem Gang. So this is just going to be a condensed version of a more formal guide, and I'm going to get right into it here, get into how it works. So this basically is an Avalanche build that gets damage from having totems out, and it gets protections from the armor and protections while channeling stat. And in order to make it work, you basically need an idol that has 7% or percent chance on hit to summon Thorn Totem. Preferably, I would say 7 or higher. It goes from 4 to 10. You want it on the higher end. But what this is going to allow us to do is get our totem base down. We're going to typically run about 5 to 6 totems. Frenzy Totem is the one, and then we're going to have 5 Thorn Totems down at all times. It's very easy to keep Frenzy Totem up because it has a long duration, as you can see, and you can just easily keep replacing it. The Thorn Totems get summoned automatically, so those should be up all the time. Now, how do we summon 5 Thorn Totems, though? That's the question, right? So we have the Thorn Totem on hit idle, and then we go in specialized Thorn Totem in the tree here, and you take the Grove Mine node. So what Grove Mine does is it allows, summons all your totems in a ring at a location. And if you get maxed out forested expanse here, plus 3 totems, you have 2 totems by default. And what this does is it makes it so that when you hit, and you have that 10% chance or whatever to summon a totem on hit, if you do proc that, you'll summon all your totems at once, and it doesn't cost any of your mana or anything like that. And I'll demonstrate that to you in a monolith at the end. But that allows us to pretty much keep our 5 Thorn Totems up all the time. In terms of how else you spec this, I spec it into health, but to be honest, you're spawning the totem so often, especially in arena, you really don't need to. You're probably better off, I'm going to try this in probably another version of the build, but where you build it a little bit of poison here, and you make it so that you get rotten core. What that does is when you resummon the totems, all the 5 previous totems basically turn to a poison cloud, because they technically count as unsummoned. And poison probably just does more damage than the on-hit at this point. We're not scaling poison or on-hit for the totem, because you need to scale minion damage to do that, and we're not really scaling either. But the poison is probably going to do more raw damage than the on-hit, I would say, because it has a stacking mechanic. So if you're looking to place your points into other areas, I'd probably invest in this side of the tree, to be honest. Now, going into the next thing, we have a Spriggan here. You don't need to have the Spriggan specialized, but I do because I like it being able to cast roots at the enemy. I like the frequent healing node here because it makes it cast roots more frequently at things. And being able to slow things at a distance with the Spriggan is nice, because usually when you use entangling roots, it's basically right on top of yourself. And it's not terrible or anything, but the Spriggans is quite useful, especially if it happens to target something that's particularly dangerous. Now, the reason why we're mainly using a Spriggan, though, is if you go into the Druid thing right here and you see Strength and Bond, 50% armor protections when you have at least one companion. We're only going to use one companion, the Spriggan, and we're using the Spriggan over other companions because the Spriggan has a range attack, so it tends to stay on top of you. So that means you can revive it very easily, right? If you have a bear or something like that, it tends to wander off, and you have to track it down, stand on top of it, and revive it. It also has a very a 4-second respawn time, essentially, which is really good if it actually does die, because it doesn't stay down for long. In terms of the other things I spec into it, I basically spec into the increased damage when you use the aura. That's the aura right there. Doesn't last very long, but it's pretty huge. So you can kind of choose what you want to do, spec into maybe more of this, maybe the patches, if you want to spec into Spriggan at all. Or if you don't want to spec into it, just have it on your bar, so that you can get the bonus from the Druid side of the tree. Next thing is Frenzy Totem. Basically, going into this for the tether. 250% crit, can't argue with that. Tether range, 125% damage, and very easy to stay in the tether. One thing is when you leave the tether, you cannot come back in, you just lose it, so keep that in mind. But super good skill, helps give us crit for our Avalanche, which is nice for one of the nodes on there because it helps proc extra boulders. We take Sloth Totem here because there's pretty much no use for Frenzy because attack and cast speed don't affect like a channel spell. Why don't we get Healing Pulse, right? You're thinking? This seems really good because if you go into Terra's Blessing, there's some things that really affect this. I'll pop that up really quick. You're thinking, okay, we have damage on next cast, a leech, and armor and protections. Those are all great, so why are we not spec'd into that? So the problem is I did test it. I tested it with the leech, basically. I opened the character sheet and casted a Terra's Blessing on myself. I got the leech to show up here. And then when I had it cast through the Frenzy Totem method, it wouldn't show up. So that makes me think that the Terra's Blessing thing over here that you get in the Frenzy Totem is not actually connected to the whole Terra's Blessing skill tree. And that's a problem that you'll see sometimes in this game. Like, as you can see with the idol, the Thorn Totem, summons a Thorn Totem here, is connected with a Thorn Totem from the tree. But sometimes that's not always the case. So you really have to be careful when you're making builds and test things out for yourself. I don't think that the Terra's Blessing thing is working right now. I don't know if it's a bug or if it's intended. If it gets changed, it's definitely worth taking some points out of the tether and putting into here because you don't really need all that tether radius because you're pretty much standing still and targeting the entire time anyway. Going into Avalanche, this is our obviously main damage skill. You need precision because you need to be able to target it. And I recommend going cold because you waste a couple points, but the thing is there's so many sources of cold damage. There's the ice thorns, which I'll show you in a second, and then you can just get way more damage from increased cold damage per active totem than anything else. If you have like 20% increased cold damage on these, that's 120% per idol. That's 60% better than the next best idol can go up to, right? And this can even go up a little higher. It can go up to 22, not 20. So with the proper idols, Cold Avalanche is definitely more damage. Want to come down to Stormfront. Pretty much just put 4 out of 4 in this because you need 3 in here anyway to get to this. And you might as well just put the 1 in for quality of life. It's not really worth it, in my opinion, getting like 15% extra damage. The quality of life is much better. This is really great for just throughput DPS. Again, throughput DPS. Don't need to max this out because the overlaps aren't really too much of a problem because the thing already overlaps a lot anyway. And the trash, which tends to be the smaller hitbox stuff, gets absolutely destroyed regardless. So you don't really have to worry too much about that. And yeah, that's how you build the Avalanche. Now the Ice Thorn. So this is an interesting one. There's 2 things you can go here. You can go the take damage on hit route, which is basically you have a 40% chance to cast Ice Thorns when you're hit, and then you get the protection bonuses here, and you max the duration, and basically that will stack. So if you get hit like 5 times in a second, you'll get like 500 base armor and cold protection, right, before it detonates and shoots the spikes away. Now, the problem is this build doesn't get hit that often. I feel like there's going to be, like, it does get hit, but it doesn't get hit like so many times in a second, right? A lot of times you're killing stuff before it even hits you from range, and a lot of the dangerous stuff that is hitting you up close is going to be relatively tanky, and it's not going to, like, you're not going to be taking tons of multiple small hits. You're going to be taking big hits is the problem. So I feel like the take cast on hit version of this isn't as good for this particular build. And what I do instead is I make it a instant cast and then reduce the cooldown to 1 second basically with this node, and then make it cost 0 with this node as a 2-hand equipped, and then use it to stack forward heart. As you can see, If I put it on instant cast, we go up to 4 stacks relatively easily. We're still getting a little bit of mitigation here from these nodes, which is good. Like basically 100 armor and 100 cold, which gets multiplied a lot in this build. So it's not bad at all. And it's 100% increased damage and a bunch of freeze rate multiplier, basically like 160%. Can't really go wrong with that. And I definitely think it's worth having in the build. So, that being said, that's all the skills basically. Oh, I do have Leap here. Leap is to just like get away. So this build basically like targets a lot. When you do need to move, what I like to do is just do this, right? Get away nice and quick. That's what Leap is there for. We're not really spec'd into it. As I said earlier, the build gets a lot of its defenses from armor and protections while channeling. So you have T5 roll here, T5 roll, T5 here, and T5 here. Those are the only slots you can get it in. That makes our protections go from like modest, when we don't have it, to super huge, as you can see. Huge protections when you're channeling. And the reason why we use Uzil's Pride is because we have those large amounts of protections. Our mana regeneration actually spikes. As you can see, we get 6, which is huge in this game because our armor goes up so much. So definitely this is mandatory. I would say you definitely want to use a staff, armor protections while channeling. You want at least a tier 2 mana roll. Staff is super good because the armor protections while channeling roll is very high on it, and you don't get one on a one-hand offhand combo. As well as the fact that mana regeneration roll is going to be better on a staff because you can't get mana regeneration on an offhand and a wand. You can only get it on like the wand portion. So that means that this one's going to be higher. And yeah, how you build the staff is basically you want the armor protection while channeling roll, then pretty much like make sure you have at least like a tier 1, tier 2 mana regeneration roll, then max out your damage if you can. Sork staff is in my opinion the best base. The increased spell damage, spell mana cost, for some reason isn't really super noticeable on the staff. I think that's because of how it interacts with the channeling skills. Doesn't seem to be nearly as bad as with other skills. Not entirely sure how the math works there, but I compared it with the Oracle staff and didn't notice much of a difference. Obviously a similar Oracle staff. So you definitely want to use this as long as you can get, like a decent adaptive spell damage roll. Obviously if you get a low one, don't bother, just use the Oracle staff. But if you can, get a good Sork staff. These are pretty much like the crowning mitigation jewels, right, for any type of protection build. Being able to not have to worry about one type of protection at all is insane, especially when you take that damage as fire and then you have 100% increased fire protection from the same item. It's just absolutely bonkers. Fire is actually definitely a dangerous thing too, so it's really good again. And having 147 mana from an amulet is just ridiculous because it allows you to spam for way longer, which is the point of this build. When you have mana, you're good. When you don't have mana, you're dead. It's pretty much how it goes. And 13% less damage taken over time is great because it shores up one of our weaknesses, which is poison. And most poison is damage over time. I think pretty much all of it is. So that comes to the Helm. Helm, again, we're shoring up our weaknesses. Necrotic and poison. And physical is a strength, and fire is a strength. So, do the math. It's really good, right? And we also get increases to armor and fire protection, as well as a pretty good amount of base armor. So, all around amazing Helm. In terms of the belt. So the belt is where the dodge comes in. This build normally has like no dodge. You pop a potion, we're up to 52% dodge. That's nutty. And that's from the belt pretty much, and one relatively weak percent dodge roll on the boots. Definitely want at least 1% dodge roll. If you can get multiple, the better. I would say once this value gets up to like 1600, that's probably when you can, relax a bit on it. But until then, like any other dodge you can get is just gravy. It's just going to make you better. If it's passive dodge, even better. But basically, I like to use the potions in a slot where like I'm channeling. I know I need to drop channeling, so I'll pop a potion and then leap or something like that, you know what I mean? Or if you're just getting destroyed by range mobs like avians, it still do high damage even with your high amount of protections. Pop a potion, it'll just like flatten that damage out. Especially when you combine it with your leech on gear, which I'd say try and get a couple leech rolls at least. I have a leech roll here, and leech roll on the idol. And that'll just make your leech super strong, and you'll be able to pretty much like leech through anything, especially when dodge is up. Obviously, you want to have glancing 100%. And yeah, I pretty much think that's it. Obviously, like I said, the idol's cold damage per active totem. You need one summon thorn totem on hit, and you probably want some leech in there. I think the best combo for idols would be 17%, or sorry, the cold damage per active totem, and then with leech on it. And let's go into the trees. So Primalist, basically this is what I have. You get this just because it's 1 point and it's super good for 1 point. You probably want to take Rotbane because poison will wreck your totems and yourself, and it just kind of builds into from taking the other stuff. I only put 20 points in here because there's better stuff in the other trees. Beastmaster, 15 points to get Frenzy Totem, and obviously Aspect of the Boar is super good, so that's what you want to focus on here. In this, you want Ascendant Circle and Protective Circle. This is both piggyback off the fact that you get a bunch of totems. Essentially, I'm probably going to move points from Elemental Shrines into this. Just haven't done it yet. But that's pretty much what you want to do here. Then pick up the adaptive damage and the cold damage here. Then just some damage in general, armor, etc. Definitely get this for the mana regen. And yeah. Then Druid, 25 points to get to this. Really solid starters right here. I'm probably going to move these points over to here because I don't know if you actually benefit from the physical spell damage when you're running an all-cold skill because we don't have tooltips yet. So I don't really know how that stuff works. So yeah, it's a pretty diverse point spread there. And I'm just going to hop into a mono really quick to kind of show you guys what's going on. This is not really a mono farming build because it doesn't really go that fast. It's much better suited to just kind of be in the arena killing things. Kind of use Fury Leap as a movement skill, but it doesn't really work too well. Obviously, because it has a long cooldown. It's more just for getting out of situations that are problematic. Now, how to play the build. I'll give you a quick tidbit on that. So, like I said, when you have mana, you're really strong. When you don't have mana, you're very weak. So you need to focus on mana conservation. You never want to overcast. You want to cast to kill everything around you in the arena. Once you're safe, you immediately go back into regenerating mana by not casting. You want to keep your mana close to 100% at all times. That way, when you have a wave that's really long, like say you have to kill some very high health targets, you have the mana to get through it effectively. Because when your mana starts to get low, that's when you have to really get creative with what you're doing, you know what I mean? Otherwise, it's pretty AFK. As you can see, we're keeping up our totems more than fine. I'm being a little bit lazy on my Frenzy Totem. But in Arena, that's a lot easier to keep down. The thing is, like, you're moving all the time in mono, so the Frenzy Totem is not nearly as effective. Springing is also not nearly as effective in mono, because again, you're moving all the time. You're going to be mostly stationary in Arena. I would say in terms of being stationary, like, you can tank most things. Even very hard-hitting abilities in Arena, as long as you have your channeling held down. But there's really no reason to tank super scary things unless you're being attacked by a bunch of other mobs at once, right? So, you know, play smart, basically, is what I would say. And one final thing I would say with this build is you'll sometimes encounter mobs with a lot of like ground effects, especially after death ground effects. And it's very important that you keep channeling, not only until all the monsters are dead, but until all the effects go away. Because if something puts like a void bomb under your feet, and then like you stop channeling and go to move, and it ticks, that's where you're going to get crushed, right? So you basically, you want to keep yourself channeling whenever you're in danger at all. and then immediately once you're no longer in danger, start kiting, LOSing, get your mana back, and then once your mana's back, go back in full. If you can round things up so you can kill them kind of more all at once and you don't have to like spread your avalanche all over the screen, that's even better. There's tons of like small optimizations that can be done like that to the build. It's not very complicated build to play on the surface, but in terms of like playing around high health targets and you know, trying to maximize your mana efficiency, there's kind of a lot of little things you can do. So I would say that's what you want to work on if you want to push high with this build. The previous push I had, for example, was like 250 something, and I pushed to, when I came back on it and played it again, made a couple changes with Ice Thorns, pushed to like 367. So there's a lot of like room for gameplay improvement, obviously, with this, even though it seems like it's relatively AFK. Because at some point you are going to have to move, and making the decisions, it's almost like in WoW where you want to know when you need to move beforehand, so you can kind of plan around things. You're not caught in a position where you basically can't move because you're pinned down by monsters. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys liked the build. Like, comment, subscribe if you did. Dislike if you don't. If you want to see more Last Epoch content, feel free to follow me on Twitch or watch on Twitch. I usually stream pretty much every day, so come by and say hi. Thanks again for watching, and see you guys later.